Welcome to yourneighbour.com. Thank you for making the time to watch us. I'm Marcus Benet. I'm part of the team here. Today we have the privilege of talking to Peter Gape. Gape? He'll correct me later, I'm sure. He's the National Director for World Vision. We're recording this the Friday before World Refugee Day. And while most of what we've done as your neighbour has been look at the impact of COVID-19 on the UK, it seemed an appropriate point to pause and consider the impact upon the rest of the world and to rejoice in how the church is responding to that. So, Peter, why don't you introduce yourself for the guys?
Thank you, Marcus. Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon to you all in the UK. I'm Peter Gape. I'm the National Director of World Vision in Colombia.
Brilliant. So, tell us about what's going on in your country. I'm suspecting that the refugees are from Venezuela?
Yes. So, Venezuela has been going through a social-political crisis the last, decade or so, more than actually a decade. And so the last approximately 5 years, it has forced many, now an estimated about over 5 million Venezuelans, so left Venezuela. So Colombia being the country right next to Venezuela, have received at least approximately, officially they said it's 1.8 million Venezuelans. The informal estimates say that it's about 2 million probably. So out of the 1.8 million people, officially that have settled here in Colombia, more than half are undocumented with irregular status. And so, but even those who have regular status, because the government of Colombia have done an effort to register a lot of these migrants, many of them have been involved in the informal sector. Trying to earn a living. And so, and many of them also, the vast majority are settling in slums, in irregular neighborhoods, which, as you can imagine, the conditions are very hard. So in Colombia or in any countries where these Venezuelans have settled, there are no camps really here. But many, the overwhelming majority, have settled in the slums. Yeah.
So
go ahead, Marcus.
How is World Vision responding to?
So World Vision, since about 4 years ago, we've responded to the first wave of people who have crossed the border. Actually, many of them are Colombians also, because before, historically, Colombians who were impacted by violence, by the conflict here, have moved to Venezuela, because Venezuela before was one of the economically stronger countries in the region. And so the first wave, World Vision has responded, addressing issues related to child protection. So recently we have scaled up our food security and nutrition support. We have done work in helping the migrants develop livelihoods, setting up small businesses. And recently, one of the things that we've scaled up along with other agencies are doing multi-purpose cash activities that will help. It's usually a 6-month support that will help the migrant communities settle into in Colombia, in the communities where they're living. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sounds amazing. Could you give us like an example of how that would have worked?
Yeah. So, for example, I'll give you a story. If you probably saw, the picture that I shared with me. So there's a little girl there. Her name was Sophia. Sophia and her family migrated to Colombia about 4 years ago. And so when they first came, they lived in the streets because they left Venezuela because the parents couldn't find work, and they were hungry. So they moved here to Colombia. And when they came here for 2 weeks, they lived on the streets because they didn't have anybody that they know here. And they settled in one of the settlements that now have about 2,000 families living. It's a slum, and at least 80% of the people who live there now are Venezuelan migrants. So when they first moved there, the dad built a shack in a land that they didn't own, and so there were always, there was always a threat of being evicted, and so our work in one of the child protection projects that we do, we have developed a child-friendly spaces in different parts of the city. Cucuta is the main border city next to Venezuela, and through a partnership with a local church, we created this child-friendly space. And Sophia and her 3 brothers started participating in the space that we created for children. And that's how they got involved and got to know about the other programs that we offer. So they started benefiting from the multi-purpose cash transfer that we were able to start. And then we also have programs on education. So many of these migrant children, when they move here, they stop schooling, and and so we have a program it's called Education in Emergencies, that focuses a lot on migrant children so that they can start schooling and keep up with the requirements of the Colombian educational system and hopefully enter the regular schooling. So they were able to benefit through those programs, including receiving cash, while the father worked as a laborer, a construction laborer. So he was able to work, but augmented with the multi-purpose cash transfer that they were receiving from through World Vision. So that's how we support families, so that they can have stabilized their lives in the country.
Right. So impressive stuff, mate. Just giving kids a safe place and some education, it changes, and that's the hook, isn't it? It's you deal with the kids, and then you can then get to help the parents.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. In fact, interesting because of the kids' participation in the child-friendly space we were doing in partnership with a local church. Then the parents started participating in some other activities, and I think now they are actively participating in that local church, in that community, in that informal settlement, where they're now settled.
As a church leader, I'm delighted to hear that, Peter.
Yeah.
So, COVID-19, it's had a massive effect upon life, in Britain, in the first world country, and we can wash our hands when we want. We have clean water and roofs that you didn't make. So how has the COVID crisis affected the slums of refugees you're working with?
Yeah, so the impact is tremendous. As I said, I mean, the overwhelming majority of the migrants and refugees are involved in informal economy. And so since the lockdown, and here in Colombia, it started the second week of March. And so many have obviously lost their livelihood. They're not able to earn a living. And then the overwhelming majority are renting, right, in the spaces where they stay. So one of the immediate impacts of the lockdown and losing their livelihood is not being able to pay their rent. And so while there is a government decree of not, kicking out people from the rentals, that's not happening. So thousands have been forced out of places where they're living. And obviously they're not able to meet their also their food needs. So now and you will hear it in the news, I don't know if you hear it in the UK, thousands actually have decided to return back to Venezuela. And if you talk to them, they say, well, you know, the situation in Venezuela is probably worse if they go back. But being close to family during this time is, for them, it's better than being in a strange land, being kicked out of you know, the place where they stay and being out in the streets. And so they take the risk, the health risk, the security risk of moving back. Some of them walk back hundreds of kilometers back to the border. And then, yeah, so I think, you know, and as you know, I mean, the government also and other agencies have been trying to support, but Colombia also has a large population of vulnerable families and individuals. And so, yeah, so the secondary impact of the lockdowns of the pandemic has been very difficult for the migrant community here.
Yeah, so it's a completely different world to the one that most of our listeners are going to be living in. It's very, very, very scary. So how on earth has World Vision Colombia managed to be helpful in this environment and keep themselves safe and do the dreaded phrase of social distancing?
Yeah. So one of the things that we were very thankful was when the government, you know, implemented the lockdowns, there were certain exceptions, right? And one of the sectors that they made an exception was the humanitarian agencies. So we have been able to continue a lot of the work that we're doing in the communities. Obviously, with modifications of how we, you know, do provide our assistance. So since March, in middle of March, in fact, we have scaled up the work that we do in the community. So with the migrants and also with the vulnerable communities of Colombia. And we have, I think by the end of June, we will have served at least 500,000 people in Colombia. Probably almost half of them will be migrants and refugees from Venezuela. So we have been, we are thankful for some of our donors that have allowed us to do some adjustments in our programming. And some of them actually have scaled up their funding. And so, for example, with the multi-purpose cash transfer that I was mentioning before, we were doing a monthly transfer for them for up to 6 months, right? So because of the emergency and the needs of, you know, the need for the families to be able to pay food, the donors actually said, let's do a one-time transfer of 2 to 3 months. So that will allow families to have resources to address their immediate needs. So we have been able to do that. And also for some of we have distributed probably, I don't know, about 50,000 food packages, basic food packages that are good for about 20 to 30 days for the families. And a lot of that is in partnership with World Food Program, which is one of our main partners, donors here in Colombia. You know, and we've changed our modalities. So for example, before in the multipurpose cash transfer, we provide a bank card, right? So that they can withdraw. And now that, you know, because of social distancing regulations, now thankfully, there are financial institutions here with innovative tools. So now we do electronic transfers using text messages. So it's been an adjustment for our team, but I think the situation has forced us to find new ways. And that's something I'm very thankful for. Here in Colombia, we have a team, a very talented team, very passionate, and people who, you know, they do what they do because they believe it's their calling.
Sounds amazing. Those numbers are just unbelievable. 500,000 people helped, 50,000 food parcels put out, and the cash transfer presumably basically stops people from starving. And,
Yes.
and yeah.
Yes.
Right. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
But talk to me, Peter, about the mental health impacts of all of this. I mean,
yeah. So that's one of our biggest concern, because, as you know, it's a silent enemy, evil, I think. So, for example, and I think it's true in many countries, but in Colombia in particular, for example, violence, intrafamiliar violence have increased. Violence against women, especially, and against children, being confined, and especially in a lot of these informal settlements where, the spaces are very small. And mental and psychosocial issues are a big issue. Like many of us who are blessed with space and a comfortable living condition, we struggle with it, right? I mean, just being confined in your own house for a period of time. So you can imagine in many of these communities where they're probably a family of 4 or 5 are confined within a 10 by 10 meter space, without reliable services. And so it's an issue. So we have been doing a lot of campaigns, not just digital, but, for example, we've developed flyers that we've distributed in the communities, and so that families can have the tools that they can at least read. And also we've provided, for example, telephone numbers where they can reach out if they need support. So not just internally something that we support, but we provide them with lines and telephone lines of government agencies and other NGOs, actually, who also provide this type of support. And of course, the role of the churches. So, for example, here in Colombia and many countries, we partner a lot with the churches, and so even before the pandemic, we've already started an initiative of building the capacity of local churches to respond to the humanitarian situation. The churches were the first responders, actually, in this humanitarian crisis and in the pandemic. But as you know, I mean, many of the local churches are also not equipped, right, to provide the right services. So we, as World Vision, along with other Christian organizations, we have developed a program where we are able to support the local churches who are already providing humanitarian assistance to the vulnerable communities or individuals in Colombia.
Wonderful. It's reassuring to hear that the churches were on the front line of responding. It's what we're supposed to do. So, and it sounds like most of the challenges that we faced in the UK, but about 8 levels higher. So just, mind blowing. So what does the community need, Peter, for a successful future? If you could just, write a memo to and have it arrive on a plate, what does it need, mate?
Yeah. So one of the things, and this is true for not most, but all of the vulnerable communities, but especially for the migrant and refugee communities. And one of the things that we, started working with them before the pandemic was helping them build their lives, right? Building resiliency so that they're able to live well, not necessarily comfortable in our own, probably using our own criteria, but a life that they're able to provide their basic needs for their families, and especially for the children. So, of course, that was stopped by the pandemic. So one of the things that we are really envisioning now and planning for is when things open up a little bit, is we really need to ramp up the work with many of these communities to stabilize their situation. So livelihoods will be a big need that we will have to address. The other thing is, especially related to children, is education. They need to, well, we're already starting it. So we're actually innovating some of the delivery how we deliver education to some of these children. We are about to start, we just started actually programs using radio. I don't know in the UK if people still listen to radio, but in many of these communities, it's one of the most effective tools. So we want to scale that up, and because many, as you know, many of these communities don't have, the gadgets that many middle class, upper middle class in other countries, kids have access to. So we use some television, but mostly radio to deliver education. But that's one thing that we really need to focus on, in the coming months, because we all know education is a game changer for many of these children. So livelihoods, education, and of course, and that's something we're working with some of our donors, the families that we supported for 6 months who were already having a stable life. For example, the family of Sophia was relating to, they were already relatively stable. In fact, they had a house already through the support of the local church. They were able to build a small house. But because of the pandemic, the father lost his job. So now they're back to square one. So I think that's something that we need to address again. We need to go back and make sure that a lot of these families have a hand up to begin their lives. So they can be.
It's giving people the tools to become not just self-sufficient, but in a position where they can then make a difference themselves. Sounds very easy when you say that, Peter. What are your hopes for the future, Peter? Obviously, you have one of those jobs that you'd rather didn't have to exist.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think for us, we, however it will happen, we hope that there will be some resolution of the situation in Venezuela. It is as a country that is rich, blessed with natural resources. It should be a country that should be able to provide, for the population. So we hope that the situation changes in the country. Actually, as World Vision, we have started work there, mostly with local churches, partnership with local churches. Because, when that happens, then many people will not consider leaving the country, but also many of the Venezuelans will also decide to return, right? So that will help the situation. But the reality also, for example, in Colombia, 1.8 million already here. For sure, even when things change, and even when things change in Venezuela and things improve, I'm sure a large percentage of the 1.8, who have already settled here, will continue to live here. So, so we hope that we are able to continue to work with them to help them, have a stable life here, where their children have opportunities to go to school, and live a life that's we consider healthy, right? So that they all grow and do what God wants them, as all of us to grow as human beings. And so that's something, and we want to continue working with our local partners, especially the churches. And this is true, I mean, I don't know in the UK, but in many of these countries, the local church is the player that's always present in these communities. And so the role of the local churches and faith organizations is important, not just, living out their mission as a representative of Christ in these communities, giving, the word, but also addressing and providing for the needs of the community. So for us as World Vision, we consider the church, especially the local church, who are embedded in part of the community as key partners for us. And that's something that, we will continue to focus on and work on all over the country. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yes, the churches in a lot of communities are the glue and the only people left. When everything else is missing. It's amazing that despite contexts, the same God works in the same way to the church. That's encouraging. So what as the UK, as local churches in the UK, how can we support what you're doing in Colombia, Peter? Yeah.
So one, we always ask the church and the faith community to pray for us. Pray, obviously, first of all, for the families, the migrant communities, the vulnerable communities in the country. Pray also for our staff, especially our frontliners, who are, I'm fortunate. I do most of my work, if not all of my work, at home or in the office, but we have at least 40% of our staff are out there in the field, so they are exposed. So pray for their safety. And I think one of the things that we always encourage people from other countries, especially the churches who have the heart to support the needs of people around the world, is to be informed, right? There's so many things happening in our world. But so I encourage you, look for, if this is the first time you've heard about the Venezuelan migrant crisis, ask about it. Our local World Vision office can provide you information about not just about the problem, but how World Vision, how our church partners are responding. So by being informed, you will be able also to I guess, pray better and seek the Lord, be able to seek God's guidance in how you will be able to support. I mean, obviously, as an organization, we rely on financial support from donors. So that's one way also that you can think about supporting the work of World Vision and building the lives of the refugee and migrant communities here in Colombia.
Fantastic. So pray, learn some stuff, and if you've got the space in your budget, you'll quite happily take some. Yeah. Fantastic. What can we get our church leaders to pray for you, Peter?
So, well, one, for our team, for me, I think as a leader in our leadership team here in Colombia, I think one, we've been very thankful that God has allowed us to have a team, a talented team that we have been able to adjust to the current situation and be able to continue to be effective in the work that we do. And we're thankful for the resources that we have received from donors to continue to work to do the work. But I think we need to we are continuing seeking God's wisdom because there are so many things that are unknown. We're trying to plan, trying to imagine what's going to be in 3-6 months, but we don't know, right? So, and this pandemic is so different because it's not just impacting you know, a lot of disasters that we were used to, it's impacting either a geographical area or a country, but this one has impacted everyone around the world, including the people who support the work that we do. So as an organization, like many other organizations, I think we are anticipating that it will impact also the, you know, the future resources that we will receive to be able to continue the work that we do. So pray for wisdom. I know, you know, resources, financial resources, important, but I think God is greater than that, and He will give us the wisdom and the knowledge to seek other ways to be able to continue to be effective with whatever resources we will be given. So wisdom, humility for me in our leadership team to be humble, to always seek His guidance as we do our work, and safety for us and our team who are working daily in the communities.
So about wisdom 5 or 6 times, resources and safety. That seems like an excellent summary to me. Thank you so much for making the time to talk to us today and sharing us what's going on in a corner of the world that's not necessarily where we think of as somewhere that's in desperate need, but is. So we really appreciate that. I also want to thank you for all of the work you and your team do to make the world a better place. I'm sure that our watchers today will be on both your website and World Vision's website and your neighbour's website to figure out what we can do. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for making the time to watch and become informed about a corner of the world in a crisis. And hopefully you're both encouraged that the church is at work and see how we can support with that. So everybody, thank you so much for your time joining us today.